This is not only a study guide, it is much more.
This edition of the Ridley Report is brought to you by
Ridley Report, Ridley Report, something, 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 Ridley Report. At the Legislative Office Building in New Hampshire, across from the State House, standing here with State Rep Dan Itza, who has sponsored a bill that I thought would generate more buzz by today, a bill that basically establishes a commission to study the constitutionality of federal acts and laws inside the state of New Hampshire. What's your main goal today in this hearing?
Well, my main goal is to make the case for the legislature to stand up and protect the citizens of New Hampshire from the usurpation of their rights. And that's the primary purpose. I mean, that's why the bill is written the way that it is. The federal government is interpository on the states, and the states are interpository on the federal government. And it's the first job of state legislators to protect the people from usurpations by both the state and federal government.
I was under the impression, or at least I kind of had a hope, that you'd have more Democrats on board. It looked like you've only got Chris Roberts as last I checked. Is that all you got, or? Well,
that's all that signed on to the bill. I mean, unfortunately, one fellow who had said he did not, and that left a hole. I know that there was at least one other individual who would have liked to have signed on. So
that's good. Is it possible for co-sponsors to join later if they choose?
Not on the face of the bill. They can sign on to the bill before today. After the public hearing, you can't sign on to a bill anymore, but you can only sign on the public record.
Okay. There was something else I was going to ask. Oh, that's okay. I'm just shooting B-roll. While I think of the other question that I was going to ask you, do you have anything that you'd like to say that I haven't asked you already?
Well, I guess what we really need to do, what I would like to impart to the people of New Hampshire, is to remember that it is their duty to enforce the Constitution of the state of New Hampshire upon those of us in government. And if they want to see the United States return to constitutional government, they really need to make sure that they get people elected to this State House who are willing to stand up and defend their rights. That's, as glamorous as the federal elections are, those of us in the state legislature have far more power to reach into their lives than the federal government, and we are their only defense against the federal government.
Do you have any sense of, is there going to be a continuation of the momentum from what we had last year, of this similar bill that came up last year? We had a lot of buzz around that. Do you think we're going to be able to match that? It doesn't seem like there's as much attention.
I don't know. You have to remember, at this point last year, there was no buzz.
Okay.
The buzz all came after the bill had been heard and people were able to see what it was all about, and it was going to the floor. It does stay within its constitutional bounds. I consider that what we really needed to do was create a capacity for us to consider as a body what laws might be unconstitutional. Nice language, and I put it up as a set of findings. And then propose that we raise a clamor about something being a usurpation of their place to dutifully consider it. That would be the function of this joint hearing.
So that was a look at the small crowd that is gathered now for the big, I guess to me, the important hearing. House Bill 1343, establishing a committee to watch the feds. So I looked at what they call the blue sheet in there, which shows how many people have already come in and signed up in favor or against the bill. There were roughly 15 who had signed in favor of the bill, 0 who had signed against. But again, remember what Dan Itza said last time this kind of thing came up. There were 30 people who either signed in favor of the bill or spoke in favor of the bill. So let's see if we can match 30 this year. It looks like it's going to be an uphill battle to do so. I'm standing here with Chris Roberts, representative from Keene, state rep, and you're the Democrat who is the only Democrat who is a co-sponsor of this bill, to kind of keep an eye on the feds. And what's your take on the extent to which Democrats could be brought on board with this?
It's hard to say. I rarely ever speak for anybody else, but no, the point, I think I made some points today that it was piquing someone's interest.
Piquing whose interest?
Some of the people who were kind of like they had that negative, and they're saying, "Well, this doesn't make sense." And what happens is on some of these bills, they make them so long, people get the nick and pick, and so I don't like this, I don't like that. When, like I said, just cut the wheat from the shaft and go through it.
So you'd like to have seen a shorter bill?
A shorter bill.
Yeah. Are you proposing any amendments, or?
Well, we'll see what we can do, and we'll listen and stuff. But it was like I said, when I used the Real ID as an example. The governor wanted the Real ID. It's like, wow, this is going to give us $4 million. But we go and say, wait a minute, you don't need your Real ID to get on an airplane. Passport. You don't need a Real ID to leave the country. Passport. So we as a legislator said, nope, we don't want the money, we expect our freedom, and we voted preventing the governor from taking the money.
Right.
And so that's, to me, that's the purpose of this.
Do you think that this bill, does it do anything to address, I think there were some Democrat concerns last year that it just looked too Republican or something like that, and do you think this addresses that concern as something that could be more bipartisan?
Well, as both the state level and the national level, and unfortunately more and more at the local level, if I'm a Democrat and it's a Republican, it's a dumb idea. If I'm a Republican and it's a Democrat, it's a dumb idea. In there, you know what? Great ideas can come from both sides, and then we need to sit down and say what is the best way of getting this done.
Were you disappointed at? I guess there was only 15 people that showed up to support it, only 2 that testified. That's smaller than what we got for HCR 6 last year. Are you disappointed?
Well, I think. I think when we ran HCR 6 last year, it frustrated a lot of people. A lot of people came out and said, wow, if you support HR 6, look at those kooks, look at those crazies outside it. You know, and a lot of those people are just passionate. They want what's best for the country, what's best for the state in there. And they were frustrated in there. And I think a lot of them felt, well, you know what? It was really kind of a waste of my time because no one gave me the opportunity to speak or to listen to me. But you know what? As elected officials, as leaders, we're supposed to leave our disagreements at the door and sit down and listen to you, give you the opportunity to prove your point.
All right. Chris Robertson-Keene, thanks much for your time.
I talked to one of the reps on State Federal Relations Committee, who sounded like she was a little bit more against the bill. She didn't say for sure, but she said one of her concerns was that she wasn't sure that the commission it creates would really be able to do anything much that just average people couldn't do by researching on their own. My suspicion, though, is that the committee would have the air of officialdom, which would, essentially, the way I look at it, it would be the only institution in the United States, other than the Supreme Court, that would be officially passing judgment on the constitutionality of federal activities. Assuming you have any concerns at all about federal activities, that should be, a constructive thing. Although, of course, personally, I'd rather see something like that voluntarily funded than have the small expenditure that's likely to be attached to it. Of course, the news is not all good in terms of the laws that are being proposed in front of that committee. There was one, I think it was in front of that, it was either in front of the Criminal Justice Committee or the State Federal Relations, where they were proposing a law that would allow or endorse federal agents to use force inside the state, which I was under the impression they were already doing from time to time. I didn't see all the details. I didn't read the whole bill, but it did look disturbing, and you might want to check around, see if you can find out what it is. There is a piece of good news surrounding House Bill 1343, the Watch the Feds bill, and that is that there are, as was the case in early '09, there are other states jumping on board with this approach. And I think Dan mentioned Connecticut is one of them. I'm not sure how many others. There were several others that he mentioned. But certainly there's still time for support for this kind of thing to build. And also, a lot of times things will pass the legislature more easily if there's not a big crowd of supporters. Sometimes things just sail right through if they're very small and unseen. That's just one of the way things get through sometimes. But would I have loved to have seen a huge crowd at that hearing? Well, yes. Do you have a message for the Ron Paul movement? Do you have a product for the New Hampshire Liberty community? Then stop keeping it a secret. Head on over to
RidleyReport.com. Email Ridley
and purchase an ad. There is no humiliation nor privation Ridley will not endure to ensure your message gets out. RidleyReport.com. Gratuitas public domain parties.